Welcome to the Matty B Files. I'm your host, Matt Bigelow, coming to you from Tokyo, from the Ogikubo studio, where I am indeed on my tatami mats, and indeed the sun is shining. This is the podcast for November 25th, 2017. Thank you for tuning in to this episode titled, I Hate Mainstream Media. I do. I really, really do. First, I'm going to pour a Ballast Point Big Eye India Pale Ale. It looks like we got a katsuo on the label here. Pouring the beer. Nice little Saturday afternoon treat. Don't drink beer in the afternoon unless you are a podcaster. Oh, I'm a podcaster. Yeah. This will be episode 85, 86. You know, I'm working my way up to 100. And after 100, I'll be making a couple of changes. I think every 100 episodes or so, podcast should just kind of change a little bit. Add a little zing here, a little doo-wop-ity-doo over there, and make a little change. Okay, let's try this beer. Oh, I love it. Oh, I'm so in on the IPA. Some people are like, oh, I like the sour beer. I tried one sour beer and I didn't hate it. And it was a yuzu flavored one. And yuzu is pretty good. This one has a pretty bitter aftertaste. For an IPA, though, it has that nice punch you in the face, Pacific Northwest, North America feel to it. I would recommend it. I would have one of these again on a Saturday afternoon when it's sunny. Anyways, so this episode's titled I Hate the Mainstream Media. I think it gives me Tourette's. Like I can just kind of start jittering and juddering, and it's because of the lack of content. Like they just claim to know the details, and then when I go and I when I read their article, I go, you're just repeating things that other people have said. And oftentimes the newspaper is just, they have like a contract with like a newspaper publishing company or something like that, and they just repeat the same article. So I often find in Japan, a lot of the news articles about America culture and stuff are not written from Japan, even on websites like japantoday.com. With Japan Times, they might have some original reporting, but I often find that it's all activism these days, and it's just people's opinions or people's feelings. Like, I don't think this should happen because of the way I feel. It's just making me not feel good, so stop it. That's really what most activism is. And it doesn't really, it's people pretending to be courageous, because you can make any declaration you want, and you can make it all 100% righteous. But I find when I take some time and I look into these things, I go, oh, the people that sound like dicks and racists are just actually they're the ones trying to piece together the facts, and they're not being racist at all. They're just presenting information. But the information is not coming out in an idealized way. And so it's just easier to be an activist and say, I think everyone should not be racist. And everyone goes, ooh, look at that person. The Pope does this too. I believe in responsible parenting. Yeah, no shit. But what is responsible parenting? To some people, it's beating the crap out of your child if they steal something from the convenience store. Other people, it's letting the child steal more. Who knows what responsible parenting means? It depends on the parent, but you just kind of say these things, and all of a sudden, wow, look at this person. Case in point, this is from today's japantoday.com, and this is about the San Francisco. So this is about the Comfort Women statue. Today's guest is Max von Schuler-Kobayashi, and he writes books about the relationship between China, Japan, and North Korea. And he says in today's podcast, he's sold over 50,000 copies of his books, and he writes in Japanese and in English. So he has some say on this. So I'm going to read a little bit from this article called San Francisco Mayor Accepts Comfort Woman Statue, Osaka to End Sister City Ties. And stick with me because I have some investigative journalism coming up for you. All right. San Francisco Mayor Edward Lee signed a document Wednesday formalizing the city's acceptance of a statue that symbolizes Korean and other Asian women forced into wartime brothels for the Japanese military, city officials said, prompting the mayor of its sister city, Osaka, to decide on the dissolution of their affiliation. The Japanese government had called on Lee to not accept the statue after the U.S. City's Council passed the motion last week. Following Mayor Lee's approval, Osaka Mayor Hirofumi Yoshimura said he plans to complete procedures to dissolve the sister city affiliation with San Francisco in December. Okay, like I said, this is not a happy podcast. Quote, "My understanding is that sister city ties are based on a strong relationship of trust, so I believe our relationship of trust has ended," Yoshimura said in a statement. The statue of 3 Chinese, Korean, and Filipino girls standing hand in hand was set up by a local private organization as a memorial honoring the so-called, quote, comfort women, unquote, in San Francisco's Chinatown area in September. Other comfort women memorials in the United States include a statue in Glendale, Southern California, and in Virginia. In 2015, Japan and South Korea reached a landmark deal to, quote, finally and irreversibly, end quote, resolve the comfort women issue, with Japan dispersing 1 billion yen, $8.9 million, last year to a South Korean fund to provide support for further comfort women and their families. But the administration of new South Korean President Moon Jae-in argues that, quote, the majority of the country's public do not approve of the comfort women agreement, unquote, on an emotional level. I disagree. I want more money. Osaka and San Francisco formed sister city ties in 1957, launching high school student exchanges and other programs. The Osaka mayor warned that if San Francisco accepted the statue, it would impair the relationship of trust. So it's incredibly regrettable, which is a quote that Japanese politicians like to say. So I just like to think of the outcome here. Of course, the comfort women issue is terrible. I had Yasuo Naito on the podcast, and he's a conservative newspaperman, brilliant English skills. And he's Asahi Shimbun. I can't remember. I'm sorry. I can't remember which paper, but he does the JapanForward.com, a conservative newspaper. And he was saying he doesn't dispute the comfort women issue. He just wonders, how did 200,000 women just get rounded up and none of the men fought back or anything like that. So he's more concerned about the details. But because he protests the factual details of some of the accounting, it's like, no, he supports rape. It's like, no, he doesn't. No, he doesn't at all. What are the details, man? So what are the details? Now, before I get into the details, let's think of the outcome here. So you dissolve the long-term sister city relationship between Osaka and San Francisco, where you had education exchanges taking place. So now, instead of having your citizens do it and children learn about other cultures directly by going to them, now instead of having a hands-on education, you have a statue that just reminds people of little girls getting raped, and specifically little girls getting raped by Japanese military. What's better? If I was a mayor, I would be like, what do I want my citizens to have? Education? Or just look up at from your smartphone while you're walking around and the rape being screamed into your face. I wonder which one's better. By the way, the mayor of San Francisco, Ed Lee, he is of Chinese descent. So one of the things that Max von Schuler-Kobayashi alleges is that China politically uses South Korea politically as activists to sow paranoia and put a wedge in between the American-Japanese alliance. They don't like it. And this is exactly what's kind of happening. You have now, of course, there's a rich history of Chinese culture in San Francisco. High points, low points, you name it. San Francisco's Chinatown is an integral part of the city's history and current, commercial modern day practices. So there's nothing wrong about any of this. However, did you notice that in this article, We have people being named: San Francisco Mayor Ed Lee, Osaka Mayor. We have the statue, okay, and the reason of the statue. We have the 2015 resolution of money being distributed to former quote unquote comfort women. So all of this is pretty open, it seems. Or is it? No, it's not. So hold on a second. There's the statue, but we don't know who gives this statue. So why is everything named except for the statue's organization? It says the statue of 3 Chinese, Korean, and Filipino girls standing hand in hand was set up by a local private organization. Why isn't the local private organization named? I think it's being done because this news article is coming from San Francisco, and the San Francisco activists and activist journalists are wording things in a way to obfuscate the truth. Because I tried to find out who did this organization. I could not find out who set up this organization. So it's purposefully, via advocacy, obfuscating the truth. I looked a lot. Here's another article. Sorry, where did it go? I don't know where this is from, but this is from the Sunday Nation, maybe? I don't know. It doesn't matter. So the first line of this one is San Francisco Comfort Woman statue could end sister city ties with Osaka. This is from November 19th, 2017. The first line, a private organization formed by citizens of Chinese ancestry set up a statue depicting comfort women on private property in San Francisco in the United States. Why doesn't it name the organization? Why does the organization only get referred to in vague terms? Now, you can go on, if you want, dear listener, the dear filer, Maddie B files. People who listen to this podcast are temporarily called filers. All right, filers, find it yourself. Go check the files. I'm not sure if you can find it. But I did find some ties to the alleged allegations of Max von Schuler-Kobayashi about the political arm of China using Korea as a wedge to form dissent between Japan and American ties. Because when the San Francisco citizenry looks up at this comfort woman statue, of course they go, oh, those poor women, ... raped by Japanese males 70 years ago, right? No, let's stop education. So what I did find here, this took me a bit to find it, but I found out about somebody called Rose Pak. Now, who is Rose Pak? Well, Rose Pak she's now passed away. She was a political activist in San Francisco. This is from her Wikipedia page, and I know Wikipedia isn't perfect, but it's generally okay. So, Rose Lan Pak was a political activist in San Francisco, California, noted for her advocacy for the Chinatown community and her influence on city politics. Pak served as a consultant for the San Francisco Chinese Chamber of Commerce and organizer of the Chinese New Year Parade in San Francisco. Although Pak never held an elective political office, she was known as an outspoken and well-connected, quote, gatekeeper, end quote, figure who supported politicians by raising funds and connecting them with the city's growing Asian American community. Sounds good, right? Pak was born in Hunan, China on November 27, 1947. She received a Catholic education while growing up as a refugee in Macau and Hong Kong after her father, a businessman, had died in the Chinese Civil War. When she was 17, she received a scholarship to attend the San Francisco College for Women, and in 1972 earned a master's degree with the Columbia School of Journalism. After a brief stint working at the New York Times, she returned to San Francisco to work for the San Francisco Chronicle as its first female Asian American journalist, a job that she left after 8 years to become a full-time social activist. So she has now her hands in the Chinese community, the print newspaper industry, or the news industry, and the political activist industry. Okay. Let's take a look. In 2011, Pak was instrumental in obtaining consensus to nominate Edward M. Lee as the first Asian American mayor of San Francisco. Okay, in 2015, Pak and her ally Ed Lead had a fallout over some things. Okay, so political ties to the People's Republic of China. Pak was an overseas executive director of the China Overseas Exchange Association, an organization overseen by the Overseas Chinese Affairs Office of the State Council of the People's Republic of China. This is the thing about research, it's boring. At various times, she spoke out in favor of Chinese government's views. For example, in 2012, calling all quote-unquote overseas Chinese, quote-unquote, to quote-unquote defend the homeland, end quote, in the conflict about the Jiayu Islands or the Senkaku Islands. Which Japan claims, which China has recently claimed in its expansionist, Pacific moves. And in 2008, opposing a resolution to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors that criticized China for the Tiananmen Square massacre and other repression measures passed on occasion of the Beijing Summer Olympics. Pak was critical of the Falun Gong movement, those Buddhists who like to do exercise in the park in San Francisco. And in 2004, she banned the group from participating in the city's annual Chinese New Year's parade. The group of others, including San Francisco Supervisor Chris Daly, subsequently alleged that Pak had connections to the Chinese Communist Party. Pak consistently denied any ties with Beijing. In August 2011, in an August 2011 interview with the New Tang Dynasty Television and Epoch Times, former San Francisco Board of Supervisors President Aaron Peskin made similar allegations, claiming that Pak was, quote, the real leader of San Francisco, end quote, and that she represented outside government's interests that included the People's Republic of China, end quote. Quoting from include. So there we go. Let's get some more information about this. So this is from the the sfchronicle.com, sanfranciscochronicle.com. And this is from September 19th, 2016. Rose Pak's death leaves Chinatown wondering who can fill void. So it kind of expresses her death and things like that. And then hold on a second here. Okay, I found it. When Pak returned from China in May 2015 or 16, I can't remember, after undergoing a kidney transplant, she was greeted by a 300-person welcoming committee that included Mayor Ed Lee and former mayors Willie Brown and Gavin Newsom, supervisors David Campos and Jane Kim, public defender Jeff Adachi, and city attorney Dennis Herrera. So there you go. So is this comfort women issue about remembering about wartime atrocities? I don't think so. I really don't think so. Here's some additional information about the comfort women issue, is that the Korean government put up a privately organized group of Koreans put up a comfort women statue outside of the Japanese embassy in Seoul. And then when a lot of people protested about it, they moved it to the Japanese consulate in Busan, in southeast of South Korea. So it's kind of a weird move, It's kind of a weird move. Of course, it was all terrible. Like, it was just terrible. There were not billions, but hundreds of millions of people were dying. Jews were being genocided at the time. It doesn't sound like it was good for anybody, except maybe IBM. But we won't talk about that today, will we? No. So this comfort women issue, the reason why I'm pissed off about the mainstream media is that they only paint one side of the picture. And when you look at all of the overall sentiment, it's Japan overreacting or just only good. But how would you feel about having to walk past statues that just remind you of little girls getting raped every day, and then your children are not allowed, but your children are now have a door closed, an educational door closed, to participate in exchange programs with another country in Osaka, in Japan. I mean, it's activism, it's mainstream media, and I hate it. It really makes me angry. As you can probably tell, I'm talking really quickly, a lot of downward intonation, all of this stuff. And I just spend 10 minutes of Googling And you get up to these groups. For example, what's another group? The Korean Council for the Women Drafted for Sexual Slavery in Japan, the KCWDSSJ. And I think they choose these names on purpose so that you can't really find them, what they do, very easily. Oddly enough, San Francisco, there's a San Francisco Treaty. That's when in 1951, the San Francisco Treaty was signed by a whole bunch of countries for post-World War II stuff. And it's when Japan was taken down as a imperialist society. It was not recognized as having like the emperor as the main leader. I know the emperor made announcements before that, but 1951, the signing of it was the official date. I think it kind of gave Japan back to Japan in many ways. So I wonder if they're choosing San Francisco, the South Koreans are choosing San Francisco as a place where Japan kind of officially surrendered. And now that the mayor of the San Francisco, who has ties to political Chinese activists with ties to, China commerce and China activist groups in San Francisco, I wonder if San Francisco is being used as like a launch pad for political activity to drive a wedge between Japan and American allyship, let's call it. But I don't think it's not going to do anything. It's just going to make the activists feel good, and everyone's going to go walk past the statue and go, ugh. And that's the result. But for the mainstream press, they kind of hail it as some sort of victory in ways, or disruption, or as something much bigger than it really is. Because for them, it's a major step. But for everyone else, it's like confusing. It's like, well, why? And they don't tell you why, because they don't want you to know about their political ties. So they will mention all of the names. They will obfuscate one of the names, give a little bit of information so as to not be totally misleading, and hide behind these kind of vague journalistic principles that are just being used to dress up activism in a sort of neutral manner, when in fact it's anything but. So that's why I hate mainstream media. In this episode with Max, we talk a lot about the current state of media and how Japan is being tied to it. And Max's message is, I don't know, we get a lot into the Christian fundamentalist movement too, and their involvement in the American military. And it's kind of weird for me to be from Japan, a Canadian in Japan. The podcast is from Japan, to talk about these sorts of things. But the internet makes things kind of international in and of itself, with Facebook now being a blanket system for old school mainstream media to now get into our pockets, and the government as well to get into our literally, when we talk about getting into our pockets, it used to mean getting into our money, but now it means getting into our phones. Now it means getting into our data. Now it means affecting how people think. When they open up their phone, they're bombarded with data. And there's a competition right now to see who can be the person that gets closest to the consumer's face and fingers, because that's what's deciding things these days. That's why there's Alexa Home. It gets the entire Alexa shop right across your table. And now they have improved apps for your applications, for your tablets. And now that's getting the shop between the Alexa and your face. Now your face is looking at a different application. So when all of these people are coming at you with smiles and brighter future plans, what they're really trying to do is they're trying to get into your pockets, to control your mind and control your money. And 20 years ago, all of these politicians and big companies scoffed at the idea of the internet having this much power. But now that it's been established that it does, they're scrambling as fast as possible to fuck your head and get your money. That's it. Let's get into the podcast. Thank you for listening.
I bought my stationery. I'm blowing up my date with Mary. I'm combing my hair. I'm studying with
It's Asagaya, and Asagaya is a cool place. And if you can come to Asagaya, I hope you have a good time.
Okay, so you got a new book coming out.
Right.
This is your third book?
It's my fifth.
Fifth? Holy fuck. Because we did The
Well,
Truth
that's
About
what the Pope said, too.
Americans.
No.
Sorry. We did The Truth About Americans.
Right.
We did, what was the other one? Do you
There
remember?
was one. The second one was about how America provoked Japan in attacking Pearl Harbor.
That's right.
And the third one was The Truth
Korea.
Is Someone Hidden. And it's mainly about the Japanese-Korean relationship during the annexation period. And the fourth one is...
with Mr. Green, the British industrialist who wrote about the Japanese occupation of Korea.
I haven't mentioned Mr. Green, no. I used as a major source a book by Mr. Aladdin Ireland.
It's Ireland Green. You get me?
Oh, excuse me.
So it was an association.
Right. Actually, he says he's an Englishman, but I am well enough educated about the Great Britain that I don't question people when they say things like that with a name like Ireland.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And then what was after that?
And after that was Hakujin no Yami, which means the dark side of white people, which actually was about how Donald Trump got elected.
And that one sold pretty well. Is that the
That
one
one
that
didn't sell so well.
No. What was the one that sold?
The ones that sold well were the ones about how America provoked Japan attacking Pearl Harbor. That went to 40,000.
Wow.
And well, that was 30,000.
Does that include online sales or is
No. That's 30,000 hardcover and 10,000 softcover.
That's pretty good.
And the one about how the Japanese annexation of Korea went to about 28,000. So
What about the Trump one? The Hakujin
4,000.
4,000.
But
That's
actually,
still pretty good.
Actually, the whole thing with this is I'm not going to mention any names here, but it's how the publisher advertises. I am with 3 publishers. Well, actually, 2 are active, and one of them just doesn't really put out advertising. The other one puts out a lot of advertising in newspapers and gets the books in a lot of bookstores, and that makes a big difference.
I would imagine it would. Okay. And what's the latest book? Well, I already kind of plugged it at the beginning because that's all I know about it.
Well, all right. The title is not decided yet. For all you people out there in Netland who are listening to us, in Japan, publishers decide the title.
Yeah.
Now, this one's in both English and Japanese, so I got to decide the English title. It's provisional. But
Good title.
The English title is
Provisional.
Second Civil War, Battle for America.
No.
And that's what it's about. It's about what's going on now in America between the right and the left. And, well, after Trump's election and President Trump, let us say President Trump, he is the president, he's elected, and how it's developing and my analysis of it as a military historian.
Okay, so that was going to be my next question. One thing that I always try to do with the podcast is that we're from Japan. No, we're in Japan. The podcast is from Japan. I'm kind of Canadian, and it's pretty easy for everyone to just kind of get on this anti-Trump train or pro-Trump train and just talk and talk and talk about it. So why did you decide to write a book about this phenomenon in Japanese and English?
Well, I see what's happening now as one of the great things of this century. And it's really what it really will result in, to my feeling, is the destruction of the present state of the United States of America. We're going to have a very different political and social place in the United States, in the North American continent, let me put it that way. I don't know if we'll have any more in the United States. And people say what you said, like President Trump is all evil. No, let me say this. President
Trump,
either
all evil or all awesome. It's very hard to
President Trump is not,
I like this policy, but not this one.
He's a symbol. He is a symptom. He is not a cause. And the causes have been arising for something like 30, 40 years. And we've reached a breaking point. And he's actually a revolution, I think. The American right is trying to save themselves. They recognize what's going on. The left are very idealistic and very, how do I say Ishokem in English? Very deep in their beliefs. Ishokem means fleißig, that's German. It means very industrious, yes. And they're very deep in their beliefs, but they're mostly been misled and mistaken beliefs.
I agree.
And
they've drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak.
They drank the Kool-Aid. And by focusing on Donald
And as
Trump,
someone who used to believe in a lot of conspiracy theories, I can identify people who have also sipped the Kool-Aid.
yes, they're just following a script that's been written for them.
Yes. That's pretty obvious because they chant. They don't debate. They chant.
They chant. And it's still going on. They're still fighting about, for example, this fellow in Alabama, Ray Moore. He's going to be in the Senate or not. And this is part of it's part of why Trump was elected, and it's part of the revolution. It's coming from the right. And in my book, I describe the forces of the right and the forces of the left.
Hold on a second. Just 1 second. I'm going to pause. Roger Moore.
Yes. Well, there's a lot of fighting going on, and it's about the establishment and the deep state. Americans, we've always known about a thing called the deep state and the establishment. For example, people who really, think President Kennedy was not killed by a lone shooter inspired by Russia. He was assassinated by Americans. And
Sure.
I'm going to burp somewhere.
Do it.
Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, that was not intended. It was something that had to be done. Okay, back to the deep state. The deep state is, and it's out there. In my book, I mentioned about the deep state, and I says, I don't really object to a behind this throne establishment that controls things. So this is quite true. What I do object to about the American deep state is their incompetence.
Yeah, incompetence, but at the same time claiming to be no walls. Like the amount of stuff that gets hacked and then released is insane.
That's
not because of a poor firewall.
And I think it's in general because American society in general has gotten to be people that are really overconfident in their abilities, and they have produced a revolutionary situation. And this is the primary focus of my book, that corporations and so forth have just taken too much from the American people. Now, I'm not a communist. Don't get me wrong. I'm not against companies making a profit. Yet they scrounge too much. Things like in America, if you have a appendicitis operation, it can cost up to $90,000. That's 9 million yen for our Japanese listeners. And I say that to people in Japan. They're like, whoa. For those of you who are in other countries, in Japan, medical care is very reasonable. And because we have a national insurance plan. Now, of course, the American right is very against that. The American left is for it. But
it's also very hard with a republic to nationalize something.
Yeah.
If it's state, if it's supposed to be federal government, no power, but then the federal government decides everyone's health with this ramshackle system that doesn't seem to work very well when it's nationalized, and people get pissed off.
It's gotten to a point where I think it needs a revolution to really get, and a lot of people have to be shot. Oh, I just said that.
Wow.
Yes.
So a lot of people need. I wonder what type of shooting is going to occur. There's a lot of shootings.
I think how it's going to come out. What I think really what I predict in my book is I think the Christian fundamentalists will take over America. And it's going to be a lot of shooting that people won't like. And it's going to be on religious. The war right now is it's not shooting war yet, but there are fist fights going on. There are groups of people meet and they bash each other and smash each other with baseball bats. And
they
things.
try to top it, they don't, and then they get into big fights.
And
I've watched a lot of Durst the Worst YouTube videos who does a good job just cataloging protest culture right now in the United States. It's nuts.
It's nuts. And the left, with their political correctness and their witch hunts, are totally insane. They're totally insane. And you can't speak with these people. Like you said, chanting. And last year in Evergreen College, one of the very far left professors got attacked for saying, I thought something very reasonable, that if they want to have a day to protest racism, why exclude white people? White people are forbidden from campus. And for this, he started massive riots, and this went on for months.
Was that Jewish guy?
It was a
like
Jewish
a
guy.
Weisenberg kind of guy? Bob
Yeah. Well,
something.
I forget his name. It was Wein, wine something.
Yeah.
And he's a very liberal guy, very liberal professor, very much for political correctness, all that stuff. And he just said this one thing, which I think, if you want to talk about racism, Let's get everyone together and talk. But don't have a day where white people are forbidden from campus. And that included professors.
And he's a Jew.
And he's a Jew.
The Jew
a
was
liberal
racist.
Jew. The liberal Jew was racist. And this has gotten too far. Now, this goes back to, as Matt had me have said, I'm former United States Naval Intelligence Operative.
Oh, that's right. I forgot to mention that. You're a double agent.
Well, I was really working for the Navy.
You're working for the Navy, but pretending to be a communist spy in
Japan.
Post-Vietnam Japan.
Right, for the American Communist Party.
And then tracking their activities back to Sweden.
Back into Korea. And they did help people desert into Sweden.
Okay.
Right.
So you have a lot of experience in subterfuge.
Back then, they had a special section for the black people. I remember this now. The black Marines. In Japan. I was a United States Marine, that's why, and I worked for Naval Intelligence. But that was totally separate from everything I was doing because I was in the white people's section. But the communists concentrate on black people. Now I look at Black Lives Matter, what's going on with this, and all this, the Confederate statues and the Confederate flag is now evolved. Christopher Columbus, a statue of Theodore Roosevelt was vandalized in New York City, in front of the I think it's Natural History Museum, because he was a racist. And this is destruction of history. This is very communist. This is directed. This is a thought-out revolution. And now, professors in university, I think about 80 to 90% of professors in American universities are basically leftist. And very leftist, very radical leftist.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have no problem with a person of leftist sympathies. Even myself, you might think someone's going to call me a fascist. I know. I call myself an imperial socialist. We have in Japan an emperor. If you work hard, the emperor will see that you live. The emperor will see that everyone works to their ability. This is the ideal Japan I'd like to see.
Can you mention that again? What was it?
Imperial socialism.
Imperial socialism.
And everyone gets a job. Everyone works. Now, in American capitalism, there's a lot of people getting thrown out because of you're just not profitable. But in Japan, we must maintain social stability. The American system produces social instability. I begin my book with a quote.
All right.
From President Thomas Jefferson.
Okay.
And it basically comes out something like, a merchant has no loyalty to the ground he stands on.
You're right.
And I'm looking for more of a political system that now in America, especially, merchants have too much power. This American concept that, they can police themselves. And apparently it was the Clintons, Glass-Steagall, that was a restriction on banking. President Clinton destroyed that. And now merchants have so much power that they just take too much wealth. And so there's this huge wealth gap in America. And it's produced a revolutionary situation. And that's why Donald Trump got elected. Now, the Republican establishment does not like him. Of course, the Democrats don't. But for white people in America, and 18% of American black voters voted for Donald Trump.
Yeah, they're having a rough time of it at the moment.
Because black people, a lot of black people understand all this stuff about we're going to have black separate, this revolutionary. Hey, wait a minute. You may be black, but you're living in America. And that means you're an American.
Yeah.
And if you're not going to be an American, what are you going to be? And if you want to start a black revolution, black people are only 13% of the American population. And how's it going to work out?
I love how the Democrat solutions are just like, we'll just give you food stamps. That'll solve your problem.
And there's a lot of American black people they look at they want to raise their kids. They want to have a nice life, a decent life. They want stability. And it's not coming from the Democrats. It's not coming from the Republicans. So far, their hope is Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump himself, how's it going to go? He really doesn't have support from the Republican establishment. All this Mitch McConnell now and all that, because they're corporate. They're all corporate.
Yeah, and pretty entrenched as well. Like, they're known for that. So, I want to ask you a question about we'll probably talk about this a bit more. The Antifa and the protest culture.
Yes.
As a former espionage agent.
Yes.
Do you see subterfuge in their tactics
Subterfuges, how do you mean?
in Antifa and the protest
Well,
culture?
I see them as a very directed group.
And do you think that the issues that they proclaim are just like a storefront for like a mob, like how the mob will use a pizza place and then do all the dealings in the back? Do you think that like groups like Antifa and Black Lives Matter are basically a front?
I think they're revolutionary organizations. I see basically major corporations cooperating with them to preserve their profits. I think the major corporations have made a serious miscalculation in the United States. They look at this and they say, well, if we keep people fighting each other, they're not going to complain about the terrible state of healthcare or student loans or the increasing wealth gap.
It's a distraction.
It's a distraction for some people. But what they don't realize, one, they're true communists. This is a revolutionary organization, which are not. They may ally now with the major capitalists, but they're going to kill them in the future. Absolutely, if they gain power. I don't think the left can gain power. What I do think will gain power is what everyone's missing is the Christian fundamentalist movement. They are very serious, a lot of Americans, and they're moving.
And they're consistent in their beliefs. I've noticed that a lot of the protest culture these days, they move from, oh, this is racist. Oh, this is trans. Oh, this is unfair. Oh, this is imbalance of power. Oh, this is privilege. And they just hop around a massive amount of topics in kind of a chaotic whirlwind, whereas the Christian fundamentalists kind of stand together a little bit more.
They're disciplined.
They're disciplined and they're quiet.
But they move steadily. Mike Pence can be considered a Christian fundamentalist, the Vice President of the United States.
Yeah, some people think he's a dominionist.
Well, yes, that's what they are. Yeah. Yes. Betsy DeVos, the Education Secretary, she is. Rick Perry is. Nikki Haley, I think she's the United States Ambassador. She is. This is what I've heard. Okay.
And a lot of these people are just like, okay, go out and protest because we have facial recognition cameras documenting everything you do. And it doesn't matter if you wear a mask because we can identify you beyond that.
Now, there's another two things to consider. For the Christian fundamentalists, one, on the right, which is described in my book, is the American militia movement. The militia movement are...
Is this your latest book?
Yes.
Talking about the American militia movement?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
On the right, the Christian fundamentalists, the militia movement, on the right.
Okay.
On the left, the Antifa, BAM, by any means necessary, and Black Lives Matter a little
I
bit.
think those people get like a lot of media attention. I'm interested to know about your analysis of the American militia movement and the American, you said fundamentalist movement.
I would say they're both the same set of people. Most militia members tend to be conservative Christian.
Militiamen.
They tend to be conservative Christian.
Yes.
Okay. So, and the Christian fundamentalist movement has a philosophy called the Seven Mountains. To have a perfect society, you need all these seven mountains of society to be controlled by Christian fundamentalists. And it goes family, media, arts, entertainment, and politics, and education, so forth, like this.
This is new information for me. I didn't know this.
Oh, really? I've known this for quite some time.
I have no idea about this.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm probably one of the non-Christian fundamentalists who's a world expert on them. There's only about 20 or 30 people like me outside the movement. Am I at a guess?
So get into it. So hold on a second. There's those seven things you said: family.
Okay, right from memory, I would say what was family?
Family, media,
business,
politics.
Right.
That's 4 out of the 7.
Right.
Maybe.
Okay, let's talk about these. So what does it mean when they say control by Christian? It means that any person to be a politician, you must be a Christian fundamentalist.
You have to be part of the same club. So they are just a different cut of, like, they're also a revolutionary group.
Right.
They just wear indiscriminate clothing and shake hands with confidence.
They have their own words and so forth and so forth. You have to really be deep in the Bible. And even though, as maybe some of you have known before, I do Christian weddings in Japan. I am ordained as what I call what is it? Junbokshi in Japanese. It means like a half pastor. I can marry people and I can bury people in the Christian, but I cannot baptize.
And do you take that seriously?
Very seriously.
Because a lot of people I know do it just for the money.
I take it very seriously. I feel that, all right, I mean, I'm doing it as a living and a money, but I also feel this is a destiny thing for me. I was destined to become this. And me becoming a Christian pastor, like, oh boy, 10 years ago, if you asked me, 20 years ago, yet now I am. And there's a reason for this. It's very destiny. I'm not deeply sympathetic to Christian fundamentalists in some ways, but in other ways, yes, I am. I see them as a force of discipline, where America needs discipline.
Yeah. So getting into those fundamentalists, family.
Well, they're very much anti-gay, LGBT and all stuff. Now, let me say something about it. In my book, I'm very specific about this. Gay people are totally natural.
Yeah. It's time to stop hating the gays.
Gay people are natural. It's when I was a kid, I studied a lot about the Roman Empire, and there were a certain number of people who are gay, and I really, in any society, basically, you look at in the human existence, a certain number of people are gay. This is a natural thing, and they find ways to exist and so forth. And my gay friends in America said the same thing to me. I have a Japanese friend who's in our local Suginami, who's a political person. I can't say who.
Are your gay friends men or women?
So far, all men. Really, I can't recall meeting a person openly lesbian who talked about being a lesbian. But now, this thing with the transgender thing, though, transgender is a different thing. You ask a gay man, yeah, I'm gay. I'm a man, but I'm gay. I like to have sex with men. All right. Transgender, though, is a person, well, I'm not in sync with my physical body. And this whole thing about transgenderism is to get society to recognize him and to change society for this person. But we're talking about a very small minority of people.
It's a divide and conquer strategy.
And this comes from communism.
Trying to help people that will not be helped by the end result of these efforts.
And this comes from a communist philosophy, polymorphous perverse, which was started by the Frankfurt School back in Germany in 1920, which came to America. This is in my book. And I remember polymorphous perverse being used when I was an agent in Iwakuni in Japan in 1975. The Communist Party was trying to get Marine Corps wives to participate and encouraging them to be transsexual or other things like that. It didn't really work well. It just didn't.
It's a hard thing to understand.
Well, yes, and now
and like once you understand it, you're like, okay, so I'm gonna go back to work. Yeah. Like it's hard to be as like a non-trans person. It's hard to be involved in the trans movement.
What's happening now in America, though, is the feminist movement has gotten involved with the LGBT movement, and they're very radical.
Notice how none of your gay friends are feminists, or sorry, none of your gay friends are lesbians.
Well, I have some gay friends I haven't met for some time, but I read their Facebook, and yes, they're very pro-LGBT because they look at anything against a transgender person is also against gays. See, in my book, I'm separating this.
It's an important thing to say. Well, they're separating it,
and
too.
There's actually, you get a lot of mental health professionals in America who are saying transgenderism is a mental disorder. I have another book that I'm working on. But I'm reading things from pediatricians who are really upset about the transgender movement because they're taking children as young as 3 and giving them hormone treatments to change sex.
It's child abuse. And I've also seen I think there's certain levels of education that you can experience or that can be delivered to children for sort of transgendered education. You can just talk to children like children, be like, yes, some people are men, most people are men, and most people are women, but sometimes they're neither, and that's fine, and then move on from there. But
just move on from there.
But there's like these kindergartners go to a library where
Seen it. They got a drag queen.
drag queen doing like twerking or something like
Yeah,
that
yeah.
for 5-year-olds. Like, you don't take your 5-year-old daughter to a strip club for the same reason you don't take them to get transgendered education.
Okay.
To
In
have
this
a
country,
so it's like, but if you're against the transgendered person twerking in front of your 5-year-old daughter, you're transphobic. But
Right.
but it's like, it just closes off this discussion where it's like, no, I'd like my child to know about trans, but I don't want to I don't want to show my child pornography.
you
It's
don't
really
have to have a
crazy.
deep explanation for this. They're just, people are people.
These are adult topics.
In Japan, okay, for those of you who are not in Japan,
I don't have a child, by the way.
I don't have a child either. But when I first came here,
But I'm deciding
I would go to
children
public,
policy.
I would go to public bath, and you would see a father taking his like 3-year-old, 4-year-old daughter on the men's side in the public bath, and no one would think a thing about it.
Yeah, it's a
Now-
non-issue.
In America, that would be child abuse.
He would be sent to jail.
He would be sent to jail. But the child might say, "What's that?" Well, it's referring to someone's penis. Well, he's a man. You're a girl. Oh, for a kid that age, that's as far as you really need to go. And fathers bathe their children until almost like their female daughters until like 8 years old or something like that here. And it's not really an
too
issue.
unnatural. Yeah, it sounds really crazy, but it normalizes the human body for children. They don't have to have this fear of their own body. That doesn't mean that people just walk around naked, because Japanese people are actually very modest, except for women with their legs.
Oh.
But at the same time, you don't see a lot of cleavage hanging out. You don't see a lot of, I don't know. Sometimes you see some ass, younger women in Shibuya, but I find for the most part, people dress very modestly here, but classy. Anything to add about the family for the fundamentalists compared to what's being pushed by the people that we've just been talking about?
I think that for the left wing, the deep left wing, destroying the family is a basis for destroying present-day American society. That's a communist tactic. Part of the Frankfurt School's philosophy was they were shocked by World War I. They were shocked by World War I that people did not revolt, and soldiers went en masse to be slaughtered, and they couldn't figure it out. So they gave up on the idea of a workers' revolution and came up with the idea of a cultural revolution, and using students and women, minorities, and so forth. And this is where all this philosophy comes from. And there was what was his name? One of them stayed in America. When Hitler got power, they came to America, and I forget the name. This is a professor. He stayed in America, and he taught in Los Angeles. And his philosophy had a deep impact on the left. And this is going on now. Now, I have some American friends who are like looking for the Chinese connection. China's doing all this. It's grown in America things. And part of why I can say grown in America is in education. There's all this emphasis on individualism. You, me. Me. I'm wonderful as I was born. I don't need anything to change me.
Yeah, it's me, dude. Get used to it. I'm
Yeah.
the best.
And
Just because of me.
that's very American idea. And don't have to work for anything. And I'm me. I'm wonderful. This is an American thinking. And I very much attack that in my book. In my book also, I have this new ideas. And,
Get into it. Get into it.
I call it responsible and irresponsible citizenship.
That's right. You mentioned this in the message you sent me.
And this is, on the left, they're going very much to the irresponsible. I want society to change for me because I'm a transsexual.
Today, and then tomorrow it's something completely different.
Something different. I want everything for my satisfaction. But a society cannot exist like that. And when I say imperial socialism for Japan, is what I envision is, yes, the government will ensure that you eat. However, you must, to the best of your ability, work. And if you can't find work, the government will find work for you. And you're going to do it.
In Japan?
This is what I would think we need for the future. And we're going to have a hard time because America, with its collapse coming, 60% of our food comes from overseas, mostly from America.
In Japan.
Yes. I think we have to plan for that disappearing. So I have been talking to the LDP. Well, once I talked to the LDP about 2 years ago.
The Liberal Democratic Party, which is the party in power in Japan at the
Right. And I
moment.
got introduced, and some guys were drinking, and they were party bureaucrats, not politicians. And I mentioned that, and they loved it. And for all you foreigners out there, I also said, gee, every foreigner in Japan who has Eijuken or a permanent residence permit should also be drafted. Japanese people who do not have a job. A lot of people are going to lose their work because of this.
I would agree with that draft if the permanent resident has the ability to vote and have more say.
I'm against foreigners having the right to vote in any way.
But then they shouldn't be drafted either.
They will be drafted. They have the right to live in this country. So, because going back to America would mean starvation.
Well, that's just threat.
It's not threat. It's to work in Japan. We can't feed everyone. We're going to lose 20-30% of our population, I think, with this. Okay, this is not my book. But when America collapses, I think we're going to lose 20-30% of our population.
Okay, fair enough. But you were talking about responsibility.
Yes.
Social. So what was the? We can get back to the collapse in a second, of course, the collapse. But regarding the personal, what was the idea?
Personal responsibility. Okay, everyone is concentrated for so long in the West is concentrating on rights, rights, rights. But there's also obligation to the government. The government, the state, protects the citizens as a basic thing.
It's a symbiotic relationship.
It's a symbiotic relationship. But people must give a certain amount of loyalty to the state. This we have to get back.
I agree. I'm with that.
We have to get back to this.
If you just say "fuck you," gimme, 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 fuck you, gimme, 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 it's not really a way to handle your business.
When I graduated high school in 1974, and by then America did not have a draft for the Vietnam War. And for the record, I think there was no reason for America to fight in Vietnam. No. But I did volunteer for the United States Marines. I felt it was my duty. I didn't feel very in sync with America at the time. I didn't really like being in America. I was born there. But I felt it was my duty, and I joined the Marine Corps. And there's an American word I like. We call it service. And up until Vietnam, it was felt obligatory that everyone should, put in a couple of years for the military. And after Vietnam, well, that changed very, very much. But America lost a lot of things in Vietnam, and that is the beginning of what's happening now.
Do you think by trying to stop communism in Vietnam, by invading it, America actually kind of imported more of it?
Well, they created it inside the United States. They created a radical movement inside the United States, and they went so far because no one can understand why we're fighting in Vietnam, really. And the whole...
So the communists became like an underdog, which gave that government at that time support back home.
Right. Very well. It was
like a transfusion.
The movement at that time was really an American movement. They did have input from the Vietnamese and Russians and Chinese to a certain extent. I know. I met these people. I worked with them.
What do you mean by these people?
Communists.
They're from Vietnam?
They're Americans.
Oh, American communists. Oh, in Japan.
In Japan. But the movement in America, too.
Sympathetic to
right.
the international... Yeah, okay.
But the American one, too. But there was some contact, of course, between Vietnamese communists or with Russians or so forth. But still, the basic independence movement was done by Americans. It's done by Americans. And it's still the same today, I believe. In fact, some of these same people are coming out of the woodwork. They've been hiding for years. And or hiding or just hanging around. In America, they weren't really put in prison. A lot of them just weren't persecuted. And they maybe lost a job, and they moved on to something else. And a lot of them concentrating in education. The concentration of education, American professors now, that are really deep, hardcore leftists is incredible.
Yes, it's very obvious, and it's very well documented on YouTube. Just you can look it up. Jordan B. Peterson, Gadsad, all those types of guys. Regarding the traditionalists,
Traditional. I call that's a word I invented. Traditionalists, like the militia movement and
The militia movement. We were talking about family. We got into how, so they just preserve really conservative values,
Right.
basically. What about you said media?
media.
How do these
Okay, well, they would look at
traditionalists or the militia?
their ideal form of media is everyone who works in media is a Christian fundamentalist.
So it's like a cronyism.
Well, we'll put it this way: if you're not a Christian fundamentalist and they take over, you're not going to be media anymore.
What type of media are they using? Are they
All of
getting
it.
into podcasting?
They have their own kind of. I don't watch this stuff, but they do have certain channels and so forth. Now, okay, let me give some numbers here. When we talk Christian fundamentalists, we're talking hardcore is about 25% of Americans, and moderate is another 25%. So it's roughly 50%. And look about how much Donald Trump got for the vote. He got roughly about 50%.
Sure. But Trump is not a conservative media type.
He is not.
Quite the opposite.
Now, I knew he would get elected when in the year 2016 during the election, in the summer before, about 5 months before the election, I saw him in a video in a Christian church getting a laying on hands ceremony where various of the congregation, about 5 or 6 members came up, and the professor and they had us there to drive out Satan and protect him. They laid on hands. And this is something that they get very, in these kind of over-the-top ceremonies and so forth. Well, some people think it's over the top. I understand it. And I thought, my God, he's going to be president. Because that many people will vote for him.
Because they're in unison.
Right. And the left wing, they don't understand what they're provoking. When we talk about Christian fundamentalists, there's a few more things I want to mention. They basically control the military.
Including military intelligence?
I would say so. Now, this has been through the Chaplain Court. This has been a 30-year effort, 40-year effort. And they've pushed efforts into getting military chaplains in. And they achieved a majority of chaplains in the United States military about 5 to 10 years ago. When Sarah Palin was coming 5 years ago.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
Yeah, she was a Christian fundamentalist. This was a plan.
And she was hot, so all the men were just like, woo.
A lot of military people are
She
Christian.
wore the Kawasaki 707 glasses.
When we talk about the deep state and working for corporate, or if we talk about the Christian fundamentalists, these are two different forces. And a lot of Americans overlook the Christian fundamentalists. It's like, they're a bunch of Jesus freaks, a bunch of funny people. They are not funny people. They're very serious. And
well, they run all the farms, and they have all the agricultural industry, and it's like I use this word a lot, but a substrate. Like the media is like a bullhorn, but these groups of people are like a substrate. They're very well interconnected. Like, when's the last time you saw a rodeo on CNN? These people fucking love the rodeo. They're
Right.
always in the rodeo. It's a huge part of their life with their giant tractors and their tractor pulls.
And people say, they're just a bunch of redneck idiots.
Yeah.
They may be rednecks, but they're not idiots.
Yeah, they're learning from 4 years old how to ride goats.
And in the Trump administration, they have gotten the highest amount of political control that we've seen. I think they're going to win. And another thing, when we talked about politics, I said politics is one of the 7 mountains. What their vision is that to be a politician, you must be a Christian fundamentalist. And to be able to vote, you must be a Christian fundamentalist. If you're not a member of one of their churches, you're going to lose the right to vote. This is part of the 7 mountains. In the military, you cannot be an officer unless you're a Christian fundamentalist. And for a long time, people who are not Christian fundamentalists are not being promoted. Now, they're separate from the corporate world. The corporate world, as far as I've been able to see, does not control them. And this is one of their fatal mistakes.
Whose fatal mistakes? Who's there?
The deep state corporate people
Okay.
who are trying to make all this business. I think,
They overlooked the military and the military intelligence, and they overlooked The Christian fundamentalists.
This whole business
Too
about
much time on the coasts.
too much. Yes, in the bubble world, the bubble of Los Angeles and New York and Washington D.C.
Yes.
This whole thing about Confederate flags and Confederate history that came up about 3 years ago,
Well, in the past 5 months, there's been tons.
and this is a thing I think by the corporate people to keep people divided and fighting, but they overlook the Christian fundamentalists in this.
Business. Christian fundamentalists and business. Same thing, same pattern. It's a fill in the blanks.
And the Christian fundamentalist view of major corporations is anyone who's CEO of a corporation must be a Christian fundamentalist or a major corporate officer.
Do you know of any major businesses in particular at this point in time that tend to swing towards the Christian fundamentalist view path?
Right off the hand, I can't mention.
No, because we have, Google, obviously pretty left. Facebook, obviously pretty left.
Well, let's say, okay, Amway.
Amway.
Mrs. DeVos of the education sector, her husband's the founder of Amway.
That's the train networks.
That's the selling soap and so forth.
Oh, Amway, yes, the soap, the pyramid.
Yes, actually, and I may say I have been an Amway member twice.
Well, was there a lot of Christian fundamentalism in it at that time?
At that time, I didn't get that in Japan.
Well, one of the historical fact about Amway was that when times were tough in the Depression, people needed soap, and Christians at that time, they needed it, and so they would go door to door selling it. So it kind of has a Christian fundamentalist survival.
And I'll say for the record, actually, I found Amway to be a very fair organization. I just was not that good at recruiting people into selling soap. I did sell some soap, and the thing that I liked about them was that it was not expensive to join. Yeah. Inside the organization, I felt there was a lot of kind of almost like religious people in Japan. It was almost like a religion. It wasn't necessarily Christian, but we got to do it this way, we got to do it that way. Come on, and it wasn't for me. So I quit. But you get your own money back when you quit, the registration fees. And all right, I mean, that's what it was.
Someone tried to recruit me once for Amway. I turned him down. I was hitchhiking at the time.
Yeah, you're hitchhiking or sell soap. Well, okay. All
right.
But this is how much they very much feel this as, I should say that the Christian fundamentalists are very hardworking and disciplined. The way they get political control also, they're quite prevalent in Washington. And this is what part of what Steve Bannon is doing, part of what they're doing with the Republican Party. When they talk about the word rhino, R-I-N-O, it's Republican in name only. This is a Christian fundamentalist thing. John Boehner, a year and a half ago, the chairman of the Republican Party, was outed because of that. He was forced out. They're going after Mitch McConnell now. This is part of where they're saying Trump is about this. Really behind it is Christian fundamentalism. They're taking over the Republican Party. And this is into reliable people. Christian fundamentalists often work in the offices of many senators and congresspeople. They're hardworking. They don't drink. They don't have sex with people and make problems. And in Washington, D.C., these people are like a miracle.
They don't spend all of their time going to protests for social media attention.
If the person they're working for is not one of them, they know his everything he does or she.
And there's probably tell signs like, go look at that earring, look at that little tattoo thing.
There's no tattoos or earrings.
No, but I mean, if there's if they're working with somebody who is not a Christian fundamentalist, they can identify by the different uniform, essentially. Like the Christian fundamentalist uniform is probably like a checkered shirt, some nice slacks, and some.
When they work for a politician, the first thing they do is get into the personnel office. And then they only hire other Christian fundamentalists to work in the office. And gradually take it over. That was a funny sound, folks. What was that? Now,
hold on. I got to take a bathroom break. Okay, we're back. What I'd like to do to everyone who just whatever, finish up with a couple of topics. You were talking about the right versus left, and then we should talk a little bit more about your book and why, unless we already have been.
Well, this is basically, all these things are in the book.
Okay, then great.
That's what the book is about.
Perfect.
And it's basically, I I'm listing the right and the left, which forces exist, and how they've been reacting together. And at the end, I come up to how Japan should react to this. And we're going to have to understand that Japan has, for people who don't know, Japan is a country that's been asleep for 70 years. We've depended on America for many things. But we have to understand that we can no longer depend on America. America is going to have so many internal troubles. And we have to, well, become independent. What we have to do is stand up and do things for ourselves. Now, I'm not saying cut relations with the United States of America, not at all.
I'm Canadian, but I consider the relationship between America and Japan to be one of the most successful international relations that have ever really existed.
And it shouldn't have worked because they're so different.
Yeah.
It shouldn't have worked, but it did.
And there's increasing amounts of cooperation in recent years. And it's business, and you don't like Americans do business in Japan, and they keep being Americans, and Japanese go to America to do business there, and they keep being Japanese in many ways. And it's an amazing fucking success story, in my opinion.
Exactly. The thing is, there's going to be a lot of stress inside the United States, and the United States is just not going to have the international stature.
It's too stressed. The American infrastructure,
yeah,
the politics. I mean, like giving Afghanistan $3 trillion a year. I mean, how much money do you think
I had a
there's in there?
speech. It was with me and another young fellow, and he talked about this gas station in Afghanistan. That's one of the most expensive gas stations ever built in the world, and it doesn't sell any gas. So, it's
Go government.
There's a book. I forget the guy who wrote it, but he was former State Department, United States Department in Iraq, and he said, "We meant well." This is the title.
We meant well.
And he talks about
This is what winning looks like. Is another
the chicken factory they built in Iraq, and it turns out they produce chickens that cost 4 times the cost of importing them from Brazil. So they never run the factory except to show it to congressional delegations.
See,
yes,
that's a terrible fucking relate. I should stop swearing. I've had a couple of whiskeys, but that's a terrible relationship, considering the amount of terrorism, the amount of drugs that are being grown in there, and the amount of destruction and unrepaired destruction. Japan had plenty of destruction after World War II, replenished itself with amazing alacrity. However, these other, it's gross. It's disgusting.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay. Well, this is about what's happening in America. In America, frankly, it looks bleak. It looks bleak, and it's going to be very serious. I don't see any political power that can bring things back from an abyss. Back in the Vietnam War era, we stopped the draft, and America got out of Vietnam, and the whole anti-war movement deflated. We were facing a similar thing back then, and it deflated. But now there's no such thing, and there's so much hatred and just enmity between Americans. Just you have a different opinion, people want to kill you. And sooner or later, people are going to start.
I saw this in video today of these 3 guys who were on a college radio station. And they were talking about Antifa, just like as a topic. Not like I'm pro or I'm against, but it's like, yeah, these people might be a bit like Antifa, but I'm not sure. But I think a tranny was in their group, and then anyways, this tranny was just like doing something, and then they move on.
You mean a transgender person?
Yeah, but they said tranny on air.
Oh.
And then when they went to break, boom, the door to their studio opens. In walks this feminist type of woman and says, "You were using hate speech. You have to go." And these 3 guys were like, "Well, what did we say?" Like, "You said tranny twice. Tranny is hate speech. You can't be promoting hate speech on our network. Go. You have to go now." So they didn't know tranny was a hate word because I understand how it can be and how it cannot be. Mm-hmm. Because I was in Shinjuku, Kabukicho, and I was in a park. And there was a man, an obvious man, dressed in a short skirt on a 3 p.m. on a Wednesday, waving a silver dildo around laughing his head off.
Yeah.
That's a tranny.
Well,
That's a trans person is like just like a person you
and
wouldn't normally
I think
associate with
I've
either.
seen one in
But-
the post office dressed in a 50-year-old guy dressed in a junior high school female uniform.
I've met that guy before. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
famous. So he's, anyways.
But people
so these,
ignore him. Yet in the
these
in the
three
post
guys
office,
were
he'll get the same service as anyone else, and everyone else pretends to ignore him, pretends he's not there.
That's good. Anyways, the clashing of ideologies. You know, these three guys, they didn't even, it was just like off the cuff. That wasn't full of hatred. They weren't like, the fucking trannies, we gotta get rid of them. It was just like, and there was just like maybe like the tranny there, and granted, maybe you shouldn't say that on college radio, but like it would be nice if they had a warning like, oh guys, by the way, I don't know if you got the message, you can't say the word tranny, it's bad. And then they would go, oh, really? We said that? We didn't know. We won't say it again. We didn't know. It was just, it just came out. Sorry.
Well, it's Maoist. It's now people talking about cultural Maoism, and you say the wrong thing, you're out. You're out, and people might hound you till you lose your job, and this stuff happens to people. It's incredible the amount of persecution that's going on in the United States. And okay, someone said something. There's one poster I've seen, Marine Corps boot camp, and I'm a United States Marine. We get called faggots 10 to 50 times a day. And a bunch of Marines. Yes, and yes, that's true.
The context is so different.
I just don't remember faggot as much as I remember maggot. Maggot, I remember that a lot.
I can agree with these words moving on, though, but you have to give people some transition time to deal with the process. Because otherwise it just becomes too easy to implement everything new all the time. And if you're not aware of all of these new things...
Can I say femnazi? Femnazi, femnazi, femnazi.
Unfortunately, they're out there. Yeah.
They're out there.
So, in conclusion to your book, what's up, man? What do you think?
Well, it's scheduled to come out probably in mid-December. Probably. This is my last day of drinking this week because I have to review what the publisher's done to it, and I hope so. I intend it to be an education for Japanese people, and actually, since it's also in English, I hope a lot of Americans read it and think. One thing about Americans is that we have not had a war in America since 1865. Had a lot of wars overseas. Soldiers come back, were fucked out, and really boomed by what we did. But for the average Americans, just don't know it. What's happening now in America? We've gone to extremes, and these extremes are going to provoke a reaction, and it's going to be bad. If you want to know how bad, let me quote a movie. Well, I'll describe a scene. The movie is 1492. It's about Christopher Columbus. The first scene shows young Christopher, about 8 years old, in the city of Genoa, and the Catholics catch a bunch of Protestants, and they got them in the public square. They got them tied up in crosses. They're going to burn them to death alive, and they offer anyone who comes back to the Catholic Church absolution, which means that they'll strangle them to death. And one woman, she goes back to the church, and they strangle her to death. Don't burn her alive. This will happen in America. It's my prediction.
Wow.
And
that's pretty extreme, man.
Well, this is what I see happening. This is all this extremism, and the right has not reacted. The left... I found an article back last August that some 20 churches were burned in rural America. The Antifa did it. They're saying the Antifa did it. It was arson. Now, who would burn a church? Some people have many reasons, but this...
Smokers.
There's things going on. They're a guerrilla organization, and they believe, they've said on record on television that we have the right to destroy something if they support Donald Trump. Yeah. This was stated by Yvette Ferluca last April.
From BAM.
April, from BAM. By any means necessary. And this kind of thinking, it's extremely dangerous. And we're going to a place we've never been before. And there are going to be a lot of people die over it. It's only one event away from mass slaughter. And people think, well, Americans will never happen. It's never going to do this. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, and I was born in the United States of America, wore in a uniform United States Marine. Americans are not immune to genocide. Americans are not immune to mass slaughter. So think about it. When you say something to someone, think about it. Why provoke somebody?
Well, the rhetoric needs to tone down. I agree with you there. It's really strange how everyone is suddenly like a Nazi and everything is so politically banned, and it just came out of nowhere, like as if suddenly that's everything all over again. I'm not buying it. I think it's a sham. I think it's a sham that's sucking people in. I'll conclude with this. The mainstream news media was completely lying the entire 2016 election cycle. Sorry to bring this up, everyone, but this is what's been on my mind. And it showed up until the last minute Donald Trump having a 1% chance of winning and Hillary Clinton having a 99% chance of winning. And there were so many people in this Clinton ideology that when she tanked and lost the election, a whole bunch of people got tossed into this alternate reality, or they were so disillusioned they couldn't accept that they had lost, because they were told the entire time, you're the winner, you're the winner, you're the winner, but then they weren't. And then the very next day, these news media organizations that got it so wrong continued to report and be repeated by the general population at large. That is shameful. Everybody should be saying this mainstream news media is a complete sham. They had it totally wrong. And then when the election didn't turn out as planned, nobody said, oh, they're wrong. They just said, well, what's next, mainstream news media? Let me repeat your next point. That is so shameful. And I know so many people that continue to repeat these points. And I have to say, listen, you got suckered in overnight, folks. You got to move on. You got to atone. You got to say you're sorry. You got to say I got it wrong. And now you got to go on and say, fuck, I hope that never happens again. It happened to me too, by the way. I'm not impervious to this. Not in the past election cycle, but in my past experiences of being suckered. You got duped. You got duped.
Let me say that, and also as a former Marine and a person, I've never shot anyone, I've never killed anyone, but I'm trained to. I'm trained to kill. Former Marine. If you don't have elections, issues will be decided by people armed with M16 rifles, automatic rifles. My M16 rifle could shoot 7 rounds a second. We're going to decide things. Now, if we don't have elections, that's what happens. And elections mean sometimes your person loses. It happens. And now the right wing is saying, okay, there was a lot of people about the birther things, and Donald Trump was one of the birther things. All right, but that was a debate, and that was an issue. Now it's violence, and it's about that Clinton should have been elected. And no, she wasn't.
It's because there's the popular vote. You know what, man? What blows my mind is the fact that nobody went, oh, shit, I was wrong. Like that lost in the past election. They all just kind of went, no, I don't accept it.
And the Russians did it.
The Russians did it. All right. Let's finish it.
Get the vodka out.
Get the vodka out. Na zdrovia.
Na zdrovia.
This beer is really weird. What? This is beer. This beer is really weird. It's like just weird.
All right, and we're back in the Esagai studio, otherwise known as a karaoke booth, with Max von Schuler-Kobayashi.
Thank God I can't sing.
What's the title of your new book?
I call it Battle for America, the Second Civil War.
Wow. And we're doing a bit of a media deconstruction thing here, we're analyzing. I wanted to kind of focus on Japanese media for a second here.
All right.
And play some clips from Japanese perspective. and then Western perspective inside of Japanese media perspective.
Okay.
And this is, I intentionally chose some military options because it's a little bit more international. Like, not everyone's going to know about the local politicians or trade deals or something like that. So I just kind of chose some general things. Now, Africa, Djibouti is in Africa, and it's one of the major international kind of military base hubs.
Yes, Japan's there. The French are still there.
Chinese are there. America. China has a massive base there. So this is just like a clip from NHK World online, their news, and it's about their case in Djibouti.
Okay.
Japan will expand an anti-pirate base in the East African country of Djibouti. The upgraded facility will provide shelter to Japanese in emergency situations, including armed conflicts. Officials say the two countries agreed on Wednesday that Japan will rent an additional 3 hectares of land adjacent to the base. The Defense Ministry will also construct a building to provide training in disaster response for the Djiboutian army. Japan set up the base in 2011 to help tackle pirates off Somalia.
My goodness.
So, regarding, does that scream of some sort of media bias to you? Or after listening to that, how would you analyze it?
Absolute propaganda. First of all, how many Japanese live in Africa?
7?
Yeah, something like that. We're in disaster response, and Djibouti has an army. They must be minuscule. Well, no, just an excuse to deploy troops overseas. Personally, I am not against putting the Japanese military overseas at all. In fact, I think we should. But as a general rule, I count the Straits of Malacca as our barrier, meaning it's very hard to support forces beyond there. For Japan, it's much better to rely on allies beyond there. So I would deploy forces into Vietnam or Philippines or places like that because it's close enough for us to support easily. We are not a huge superpower like America.
But do you think Djibouti is like a trendy place for international governments to establish?
Yes, it's some place where people can, because it's a tiny little place, former French colony. As an independent nation, it's almost nothing. So they can easily be bought and sold in a strategic location. The bottom of the Red Sea,
right close to Oman and the oil trafficking happening there.
It's all close to that.
Legal oil traffic, legal and illegal, but
a place where it can easily be done, and it's an excuse.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. The next one is titled "Prime Minister Abe and War."
In his first speech to the Diet since he was re-elected as Japan's Prime Minister, Shinzo Abe says he will be enhancing Japan's defense capabilities, a response to the growing threat from North Korea.
As North Korean provocations escalate, I will take concrete action under the strong Japan-US alliance to prepare for all possible situations. I will do my best to enhance Japan's defense capabilities.
All situations, every single one.
Abe also says he strongly believes discussions on constitutional revisions will move forward as Diet members try to solve difficult issues. Abe's Liberal Democratic Party is looking at various parts of the founding document, including the article that renounces war. The party says it will continue discussions.
I address the Constitution in my next book a bit, and my goodness, I hope he has another plan for something besides threats from North Korea, because North Korea is not a threat at all.
I know. I was right about North Korea. I said North Korea is a social threat, and Trump really changed his tone about North Korea after he came to Japan. I think because there's so many North Korean potential sleeper cells existing in Japan at the moment that we don't want North Koreans bombing tourists, North Koreans living in Japan bombing tourist cells.
About that. Even if there's a war, I think most of those sleeper cells would probably do nothing.
They would affect tourism like a motherfucker, that's for sure.
Well, they would probably do nothing because they live here, and they don't want to go back to the north. Really, they don't want to live there.
yeah, but you still got a bunch of like 15, 16-year-old fourth generations that want to make a change, and
There could be a few instances. There could be a
you know
few.
what? With the missile flies over Japan, these people go into their school parks, wave North Korean flags, and do dances. Man, they are ready, in my opinion. If this is a weird political wild card by Pyongyang that it has. If America attacks North Korea can then say, all of the North Korean supporters all over the world, go bomb your local tourist
really means
agency.
Japan.
Which really means Japan, because there's 30 or 40,000 North Koreans.
There's about 300,000.
300,000 North Koreans? Yes. Okay. I would assume, I only heard 30,000, but I was assuming that the numbers would be larger. So, in order to prevent such a thing from happening, and in Japan and America negotiating on this issue, having the potential of a North Korean counterreaction within Japanese borders while Japan is reorganizing its economy for a tourism boom is not something they want to risk. And Japan is so risk averse.
It's the whole thing.
Even if there's a 0.001% chance, they're going to say maybe it's not
missile
the best thing.
North Korea really has very little missile capability, and I don't even believe they have a nuclear weapon.
That's right. You've mentioned that before.
I mentioned that before, because everything they do is fake. Now, this stuff, why they keep doing this? They're afraid of America doing something like Muammar Gaddafi, or
establishing
was
a
that
gold
something
standard.
I did? That was a burp. Ladies and gentlemen, excuse the burps, but I'm just drinking beer, so it can't be helped. Now, this is not my NHK interview style. This is with Matt Bigelow, so you have to understand how this happens.
Bigelow.
Excusez-moi.
Yes, it's all right. Bigelow.
Okay.
The Français.
Now, the North Koreans, they don't want that to happen to them. What America did to Iraq, or what America did to Libya, and why America invaded Libya, why America made a mess there. There's all kinds of theories, but I won't go into that. But it was a mess. It was not right. It was a stable country until America just went in and just trashed it. And North Korea doesn't want to happen. Now, North Korea is one of the world's nastiest countries. It's hard to have sympathy for North Korea. It really is.
Well, the people, yes. The country, no. The
Right, the people,
diplomacy.
yes, for the country, no.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's nothing we can do by invading them or something. No. Somebody asked me about invading them the other day. I said, it would take 20 U.S. divisions, plus about, 15, 20 divisions South Koreans have.
And then what do you get?
Nothing.
You get tourism.
You get a lot of casualties, and
And was it true that post-Vietnam War that basically the United States rebelized the entire North Korean peninsula?
No, this was in the Korean War.
It was rebelized.
In North Korea was rebelized. It was the
From
statement,
head to toe.
just with the North, the communist controlled part.
Yeah, head to toe.
And General LeMay, who just really bombed and nastily bombed Japan in World War II, said, we're not going to leave two bricks joined together. That's how he stated the bombing campaign in North Korea. They devastated the place. So they have bad memories. They have the bad memories. And unlike Japanese,
and
they
North
don't forget.
Korean students in North Korea, they have to look at, in their schools, images of paintings of American soldiers hammering nails into women's heads of North Koreans.
That may be exaggerated, but only may be.
I've heard from North Korean interviewees that that's the case. And also, I've seen the images myself. It's like they every day they look at these images of North Korean women having nails driven into their skulls by American soldiers. And they're not real pictures. These are just paintings.
Right. Well, okay. Americans have done a lot of things in the war. And I mean, in the wars, and this is another topic, a lot of people, it's very controversial, but Japanese did not do as much as Americans did. I'll put it that way. Americans waterboarded in the Philippines and so forth. It's admitted. Americans do things. So people do things in wars. Their own government is pretty nasty. Koreans are pretty nasty people in general. Frankly speaking, when they get into you get in Korean punishment and so forth, they're very strict. They're very strict. And they envision things as like they do. But America, in the Korean War, did a lot of things. And in the bombing of North Korea was pretty awful during the Korean War. It was awful. So they have a huge fear of America. Now, their regime is something that's it's worse than George Orwell. It's yes, but it's their regime, it's their government, it's their country, and basically it's a thing. Invading them has no. There's just no benefit to it.
I agree. So that last clip was called Abe and War. Do you think that Prime Minister Abe would use the idea of a North Korean threat in order to garner public opinion, in order to change the constitution, to reinstate Japan as a non-pacifist country?
I'll put it this way. I think there's a strong Japanese government relationship with North Korea. That when Japan
that's true, yes.
They just call up and say, hey, please do something. And I remember some years ago, former Prime Minister Hatoyama, who was pretty left-wing, was saying we don't really need the alliance with America. And North Korea, almost on cue, went and torpedoed a South Korean warship.
Interesting.
And I had some friends.
I remember that.
They're asking me if was that a coincidence. As a former U.S. naval intelligence agent, I do not believe in coincidences. And Japanese politicians have visited the North. This is documented. This is known. So there is a connection. And the nasty thing is that, the abductees that North Korea kidnapped from Japan, there's been no effort from the government really to get them back.
Because it would open up too many wounds about Japan's annexation.
It's just too difficult. No.
Well,
there's no the annexation. There's no wounds to be opened. It was a really beneficial annexation.
I know, but the political potential.
It's just too hard to do.
Yeah,
and they just won't work for it. I think so.
It's interesting. It's interesting how much of an abyss North Korea it really is.
On the other hand, I'm going to say something radical here. I'll say in English that without the abductee issue, North Korea could be an ally to Japan. Because I don't feel North Korea is that dangerous to Japan.
Me neither. I've been saying this for years.
I feel South Korea is dangerous to Japan.
Politically.
And militarily. Yes.
Okay,
I've seen a few instances where they've been talking about things.
Oh, you know what? Because all of the South Korean males have to use high-tech weaponry training from the age of 16 to 18.
It's the political atmosphere there.
I know a guy he's like a computer scientist, but he's Korean, and he had to spend 2 years of his life practicing firing high, I don't know how you say this, like grenade launchers, like where you have a clip of grenades and from a moving boat at targets. And like all of these dudes have like this intense military
About 3
training.
years ago, a certain Korean government institution, a fisheries bureau, remote in Busan, in a speech, said that Tsushima is Korean territory. And they
Where's
said
Tsushima?
Tsushima is about 50 miles from South Korea.
Where?
It's in the Tsushima Strait.
Okay.
It's part of Nagasaki Prefecture.
Okay, now I know what you're talking about.
It's also,
on Kyushu there, north of Kyushu.
It was always been the reign of the So daimyo, but which has always been Japanese. And it's been a kind of a transitory point between Japan and Korea, but it's never been Korean territory. Never. And South Koreans are claiming it. This is, I have had word from friends in the Japanese military. They're worried about it. And they asked me, military speaking, South Korea can invade Tsushima within about an hour and a half.
Who lives on Tsushima?
Well, there's about 50,000 Japanese people living there. Okay. And there's a lot of Koreans coming in and just trying to move in. Something like this, because South Korea is so wrapped up in its anti-Japanese thing.
Politically
and socially.
That I still know a lot of Koreans that live in Japan and like Japan, and they're not necessarily born in Japan as Koreans, but they've chosen to live and work in Japan.
Right.
And that's a big difference. But there's still a lot of anti-sentiment.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's all based on fallacy. So I regard South Korea as a much more dangerous military foe than North Korea.
That actually makes sense. I don't think that South Korea would actually attack.
They might. Craziness, sanity. North Korea simply cannot. They just don't have the ability.
Yeah. They're basically in rowboats, technologically speaking. All right.
Did you ever see? Okay, this is an image, so I can't tell you on Radio Land what anyway. But it was Kim Jong Un, president or leader, and he's in a boat, and it's a wooden boat, and the army is out there in the water pushing the boat. And this is when I say about North Korea. I said this is the best boat in North Korea. The army has to get out and push. And no, the country is that backward. It's just that backward.
I agree. Yeah.
And they're just trying to show them. They're just trying to show the world.
If you look at the images from North Korea, it's a beautiful place, though, because there's no wires anywhere. It's all just nature.
Right.
But that's exactly the same thing that makes it so backwards.
I think they're
It's
very
basically like 1976 in Oklahoma with communism.
I think they're very dedicated people to the way of life, and we shouldn't go and try and change them. Just ignore them for a while.
All right.
Anyway, next.
Okay, now we had a couple of clips. One was about Abe, Miss Prime Minister Abe, about the changing of the pacifist constitution.
Correct.
The other one was about Japanese military expansionism in Djibouti, and that was now we're going to listen to a PhD from Sophia University. His name is Jeff Kingston.
No.
You know Jeff?
Oh, gosh. I've read his stuff long. Okay.
And he is talking about the after effects of Trump's visit to Japan.
Okay.
He's leaving the region without having triggered a shooting war or a trade war. So on that basis, yes, a stunning success. But in terms of substance, not really very much. American diplomacy in Asia is adrift under Trump.
Mr. Kingston, I have read his articles in Japan Times a long time. And my goodness, what a leftist. Okay, a leftist, I don't want to say this as an insult, but he has nothing good to say about anything. And
he doesn't even have anything to say. What did he just say there? He was just
President
trashing.
Trump came to Asia and he made some statements. And, okay.
At least provide some evidence or provide some information.
Usually these kind of visits are to say, hello, we're still going to keep things going on and talk. And it's a courtesy.
Oh, that leads us into the next part of the clip.
After a 12-day tour, we don't really know where he stands on critical security, trade issues, and on shared values. So I think that is an indictment of his trip. And the takeaway is that this trip was a lot of pomp, a lot of ceremony, everybody fawning on Trump.
We do know where he stands. He's a Buy American.
America first. I'm Canadian. I'm saying that not as a supporter.
Basically, that's what he said was Buy American, which we've gotten that in Japan for a long, long time.
Notice how snarky this guy's being without providing any details.
He didn't say any details.
And he's a PhD of
specific.
Asian studies.
Now, my university career was really colorful. I never graduated. And I write best-selling books. Thank you, Mr. Kingston. But I know a lot more things about things than you do. Or maybe you're just giving talking points and being told what to say by someone.
This is hilarious. Yeah. Let's move on.
Playing to his ego. At the end of the day, not many deliverables.
This tour materialized amid heightened tensions over North Korea, and the issue dominated the agenda. But Trump held back on some of the inflammatory rhetoric we've heard in the past. What do you think of his approach?
Well, it's hard to really gauge what his approach is at any given moment. To the extent that allies are no longer certain about what American policy is, I think that weakens the American position.
It's just claptrap. It doesn't say anything. I want logical criticism of whoever it is that you're criticizing. But this whole thing is just like, we don't know what the policy about the heart of the matter, and in the spirit of the deal, at the end of the day, we have to analyze the ins and the outs. Like, it's nothing. And this guy is a PhD at Sophia University.
He, in his newspaper column, he always had one Japanese guy that he quoted. Another sensei at Sophia, Nakano Soichi.
He's a douchebag.
Who's a communist.
Yeah.
He's a Japanese communist.
Same thing, yeah.
Yeah. And he's now no longer writing for the Japan Times. I don't know why. But he really went overboard in his criticism of Prime Minister Abe. Now, Prime Minister Abe, sometimes I like him, sometimes I think, what a funny guy.
Yeah, he's a hard fish to catch.
Yeah.
Because he likes sushi.
Well, I mean, when a president comes and visits, he comes and, and does a ceremonial thing. And this is to say we're all still friends. And the real scut work is done by other subordinates. This is how it works.
Yeah. The guy at the top gets to make all the dramatic declarations, and then everybody else has to handle all the technical details.
So, one thing I'll say about President Trump. Now, one thing I want to say here to a lot of people, maybe they don't like, but recently he's taken a really hard line to North Korea, right?
He's changed it. He's more social.
But guess what? North Korea has stopped shooting off missiles for some time, haven't they?
Yeah.
Now, President Obama couldn't get that done. Now, the North Koreans shooting off missiles, I always laugh because it didn't really mean anything in a military person. But
because it's just like this dinky missile that flies across the ocean.
Well,
how big is a missile?
They got some that can fly.
But they're so small.
Right. Some actually.
It's like shooting a bullet at the moon.
Actually,
from
I read
Texas.
some technical people saying the missile that really went, they couldn't carry a nuclear weapon because it's just not enough power and so forth. Anyway, the mass media in America is just panic, ignored that kind of thing. But still, it comes down to the point. If North Korea had a missile they could shoot into Los Angeles, America has 5,000 nuclear weapons. What would they do to North Korea? Please.
Yeah, it's a non-issue. All right, let's move on. This is actually. Oh, this is hilarious. So I think this guy's a communist, actually, because listen to the way Mr. Kingston. Listen to the way he listen to the tone of his voice from when he goes from Mr. Trump is to China.
President Xi Jinping is promoting globalism and multinational deals with his Belt and Road Initiative. Which vision will win out?
Well, I think that President Xi was very happy with Trump's visit to Asia. He's the big winner here because the United States under Trump has basically surrendered a lot of the goodwill and influence that have been built up over the decades. Trump signals American retreat, and Trump is destroying the multilateral system that has been the basis of a free and open Asia-Pacific.
Why doesn't he go live in China?
Yeah, I don't know, man. Maybe
go
you
work
should.
for Mr. G.
Yeah. Stop sucking off the teat of your mainly English-speaking university, Sophia.
Because in Japan, he feels that he has no chance of getting shot by students. Don't say that in China.
Yeah,
no, I don't have any enmity towards China.
Me neither. Again, it's the issue between government policy and people. But when I meet Chinese people, I always have, not always, but they're fun, man.
If Mr.
They're
Kingston
cool.
lived in China and criticized Chinese leaders like he criticized Japanese leaders, he'd be shot
in the street.
Something happened to him.
His organs would be harvested.
I wouldn't want one. But
me neither. You'd start talking the same way.
Oh, yes. Mr. Kingston, and as I mentioned before about my imperial socialism theory and that people should be drafted for work if they're underemployed to be put in farms, where should he go?
Well, Maybe he'd be really good counting beans.
Part of my philosophy, and I mentioned in my second book, is if we don't have enough farms in Japan to keep people fed, to build farms in Russia, in Siberia. It's my second book, my next book. And we can send him there.
I think he might like it. He speaks highly of it as it is. All right, this is
Yes.
the end. Max, thank you so much for doing this.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure.
What's the name of your new book?
Okay, the provisional title. I don't have the set title yet. The provisional title is Battle for America, Second Civil War.
Well, it's very engaging. And why did you write it from Japan?
Well, I live in Japan. And also for Japanese, it's written primarily for Japanese people to understand what's happening in America. And also, Americans can get a good idea what's happening in America from reading my book. And Americans, please think. Take a step back. Settle down. Thank you very much.
All right, cheers, bud.
アイドホのことは知らないけどアイドホポテトは食べるよみんな食べるからねアイドホ来たら国立公園で月のクレーター見るんだみんな見てるからねボイシーの近くで何か食べに行こうみんな食べるからねみんな食べるからねホーチミンで会った女の子名前はセブンお気に入りの数字は11僕はいい気分セブンイレブンいい気分チャンビールチャンビールタイのチャンビールちゃんと酔っ払ったよみんな酔っ払おうからねそれであゆたや雪のチケット買って歩き回っても酔っ払ってたよみんな見てたけどねメコン川ロイに立って歴史の長さに感動だみんな気にしないけどねみんな気にしないけどねホーチミンで会った女の子名前はセブンお気に入りの数字は11僕はいい気分セブンイレブンいい気分僕の目をまっすぐ見て南に行こう南に行こう僕の目をまっすぐ見て国境の南に行こう国境の南に行こうみんないないところはいいねビゲロと同じビゲロ晩の宇宙バンガローに一部屋プリーズみんな行きたいでしょプロショの宇宙飛行士とスペースウォーカーパーティーだみんな飲みたいでしょ若者出て無室で地球を見たら地図で見たのと全然違うよみんなびっくりだよねねえみんなびっくりFalcon Pass.